The Corvani High Command received the first distress signals at 347 Standard Galactic Time, what began as scattered reports of technical malfunctions across human territories quickly escalated into a crisis that defied every protocol in their military handbook. Fleet Admiral Vorthak had governed the Corvani Empire for 30 years, maintaining order across 47 star systems through a combination of strategic fear and administrative efficiency. He prided himself on being able to predict and counter any threat to Imperial stability. But as reports flooded in from across the galaxy, he found himself facing something completely unprecedented. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Centauri mining platform," reported Communications Officer Rask. Transmission indicated complete system failure across all primary networks. Kepler station reports similar problems, added another aide. Navigation computers are showing false coordinates. Their supply ships are stranded in hyperspace. Vega command post has gone completely dark. No response to any communication attempts. Admiral Vorthak studied the tactical display as red warning lights began appearing throughout Corvani space. This wasn't random equipment failure. The pattern was too precise, too coordinated. But how could humans coordinate an attack across multiple star systems when they had no spacefaring capability? "Sir." The voice belonged to technical analyst Drix, who was monitoring the Empire's central computer networks. "The virus signatures we're detecting, they're not just shutting down our systems. They're rewriting core programming. And the source code, it's based on our own technology, but modified in ways that suggest years of study and development." The realization hit Admiral Vorthak like a physical blow. "They've been preparing for this, sir?" "The humans. They haven't been broken. They've been planning." Even as the Corvani scrambled to understand what was happening to their computer networks, the second phase of the human assault began. Across the galaxy, 17 ships materialized out of quantum tunneling drives at coordinates that should have been impossible for them to know. These weren't the crude vessels that human civilization had possessed before conquest. They were hybrid craft built with salvaged Corvani technology but redesigned according to human engineering principles that prioritized adaptability over standardization. Captain Lisa Park commanded the lead vessel from the bridge of what had once been the passenger liner Aurora. For 15 years, she had officially worked as a cargo supervisor at the Denver spaceport. In reality, she had been retrofitting salvaged spacecraft in underground facilities, preparing for this moment. "All ships report ready status," announced her first officer. Commander Chun, Sarah's elder brother, who had been listed as missing, presumed dead since the early days of occupation. "Target acquisition confirmed. We have positive locks on all primary objectives." The human fleet wasn't designed for ship-to-ship combat. Instead, each vessel carried specialized teams equipped for infiltration and sabotage of Corvani installations. While the computer virus crippled their communications and navigation systems, human commandos would capture or destroy the critical infrastructure that kept the Empire functioning. "Initiate Operation Nightfall," Captain Park commanded. The first target was the Corvani communications hub at Vault 359, a massive space station that coordinated military traffic across 12 star systems. As the station's computers struggled with the viral infection, a team of 40 human soldiers materialized in its central command center via personal teleportation devices reverse-engineered from captured Corvani technology. The Corvani garrison, trained for external threats and rebellion suppression, had never prepared for infiltrators who could appear anywhere within their supposedly secure facilities. The station fell in 17 minutes without a single human casualty. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy as human strike teams seized communications relays, supply depots, and administrative centers. But the most ambitious target was the Corvani Empire's crown jewel, the automated manufacturing complex at Rigel Prime, which produced 90% of their military equipment. The Rigel facility was supposed to be impregnable. It was protected by overlapping defensive systems, patrolled by automated warships, and monitored by artificial intelligence networks that could respond to threats faster than biological reactions. It was also completely dependent on computer systems that human scientists had been studying for 20 years. Dr. Amanda Foster led the team that infiltrated Rigel Prime, as the facility's security systems struggled with viral infections. Her group moved through the complex like ghosts, their presence masked by false sensor readings and misdirected security protocols. Their mission wasn't destruction, it was conversion. "Upload package Alpha," Dr. Foster commanded as her team reached the main manufacturing control center. "Let's teach these machines to build something useful for a change." The virus they introduced didn't shut down the Rigel facility. Instead, it reprogrammed the automated systems to begin producing equipment for human resistance forces. Within hours, the facility that had been churning out weapons for Corvani oppression was manufacturing advanced medical supplies, communication equipment, and defensive systems for every species the Empire had conquered. On Earth, the human uprising was proceeding with clockwork precision. Marcus Webb's resistance network, now revealed to number in the hundreds of thousands, began simultaneous operations in every major city. But this wasn't the desperate violence of a traditional rebellion. It was a carefully orchestrated transfer of power. "Corvani garrison forces have laid down their weapons," reported Jennifer Torres from New Geneva Command. "Without computer support, they can't coordinate resistance or call for reinforcement. Most are requesting protection from angry human crowds." Marcus nodded as he reviewed tactical reports from around the globe. "Make sure they get it. We're not like them. We don't rule through fear." The transformation was happening everywhere. In London, Corvani administrators found themselves escorted to secure facilities where they were treated with the same clinical efficiency they had once shown to humans. In Tokyo, resistance fighters helped confused Corvani soldiers contact their families on other worlds. In Cairo, human doctors began treating Corvani personnel suffering from panic attacks as their worldview crumbled around them. This restraint wasn't born from weakness or forgiveness. It was a strategic decision that demonstrated something the Corvani had never understood about human nature, the ability to distinguish between justice and revenge. But Admiral Brex, watching his empire dissolve from the command deck of Dominion's Edge, was beginning to understand what they had truly been ruling. Not a broken species accepting defeat, but a sleeping giant that had been patiently waiting for the right moment to wake up. "Sir," Lieutenant Vash announced, his voice tight with poorly concealed panic, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth. It's from the human resistance leadership." The main screen flickered to life, showing Marcus Webb sitting in what had once been Admiral Rex's own Earth headquarters. Behind him stood Dr. Sarah Chun, no longer the grieving mother who had visited the garrison, but a woman whose composure radiated quiet determination. "Admiral Rex," Marcus began, "I am Marcus Webb, speaking on behalf of the Human Liberation Command and the Galactic Freedom Coalition. As you have undoubtedly noticed, your empire is no longer functional." Admiral Rex activated his communication system. "This is a temporary technical malfunction. The Empire has weathered countless rebellions. Your species will be crushed just like all the others." Sarah Chun stepped forward. "No, Admiral. You misunderstand what has happened here. This isn't a rebellion. It's liberation. And it's not just about humans." As if summoned by her words, new figures appeared on the transmission. Representatives of the Zentari, whose moon had been destroyed to break their spirit. Alkian diplomats who had spent decades in forced exile. Valdris commanders whose people had been dying in the Outer Rim to create this opportunity. "For 300 years, Sarah continued, you've ruled through fear. You've broken spirits, destroyed cultures, and convinced entire civilizations that resistance was impossible. But fear is not strength, Admiral. It's weakness. And weakness always falls when it encounters genuine determination. Every species you conquered had something you needed," Marcus added. "The Zentari provided scientific expertise. The Alkians offered agricultural knowledge. The Valdris gave you military tactics. Humans, we gave you patience. We waited, we learned. We prepared. And we never, ever forgot. Admiral Rex realized with growing horror that he was watching more than the collapse of military installations. This was the dissolution of 3 centuries of Corvani dominance, happening in real time across every world they had ever conquered. Your garrison forces on Earth have surrendered, Sarah reported. Your fleet at the Outer Rim is trapped without navigation computers. Your automated systems are no longer under your control. Your communications networks are broadcasting our message to every Corvani world, every military installation, every administrative center in your former empire. What are your terms? Admiral Rex asked, his translator rendering words that tasted like poison. Unconditional withdrawal from all conquered territories, Marcus replied. Immediate cessation of all military operations. Full resto. They dominated through fear, until a human child's death unleashed chaos. The Corvani Empire stretched across 47 star systems. Its iron grip maintained not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through calculated terror. For 300 years, the reptilian Corvani had perfected the art of psychological warfare, breaking the spirits of countless species before their bodies ever needed to be broken. Admiral Rex stood on the observation deck of the dreadnought Dominion's edge, watching the blue-green planet called Earth rotate slowly below. The humans had been part of the Empire for barely 2 decades, yet they continued to fascinate him in ways that disturbed his methodical mind. Unlike the Zentari, who had surrendered after witnessing the destruction of their moon, or the peaceful Alkians, who had simply laid down their weapons when the Corvani fleet arrived, humans had fought until the very end, even in defeat. There was something in their eyes that made seasoned Corvani soldiers uncomfortable. It wasn't the broken resignation they were used to seeing in conquered peoples. It was something else entirely, an ember that refused to be extinguished, waiting for the right moment to ignite. "Sir?" came the voice of his aide, Lieutenant Vash, interrupting his thoughts. "The monthly tribute collection from Sector 7 is complete. The human administrators have delivered the required quotas of rare minerals and technological components." Zrex nodded, his scaled fingers drumming against the viewport. The humans were efficient, he had to admit. More efficient than many species who had been under Corvani rule for centuries. They organized themselves with military precision, meeting every deadline, fulfilling every demand. Perhaps that was what unsettled him? They were too good at compliance. "What about the other matter?" Zrex asked, not turning from the viewport. "The human colony ship attempting to reach the Outer Rim? Intercepted and destroyed as ordered. No survivors." This was standard protocol. Any attempt by conquered species to expand beyond their assigned worlds was met with immediate and decisive action. The Corvani had learned long ago that hope was dangerous, hope for escape, hope for independence, hope for a future beyond the Empire's control. It was better to crush such aspirations early and completely. "Make sure the destruction is broadcast to all human settlements," Zrex commanded. "They need to understand the consequences of defiance." On Earth's surface, in the sprawling megacity of New Geneva, the broadcast played on massive screens throughout the commercial district. Citizens stopped what they were doing, forced to watch as the colony ship New Horizon, carrying 50,000 human volunteers seeking to establish a mining settlement on the edge of known space, was reduced to debris in a matter of seconds. Among the crowd stood Dr. Sarah Chun, clutching the hand of her 8-year-old daughter, Emma. Sarah had been one of the lead scientists working on the colony ship's terraforming equipment before the mission was canceled by Corvani authorities. She had to bite back tears as she watched years of work and thousands of lives vanish in brilliant flashes of plasma fire. "Why did they do that, Mom?" Emma whispered, her small voice barely audible over the shocked murmurs of the crowd. Sarah knelt down to meet her daughter's eyes. Those same bright brown eyes that held too much understanding for someone so young. How could she explain to a child that their lives, their dreams, their very existence was considered a threat by their overlords? Because they're afraid of us, Sarah said finally, surprised by her own honesty. Afraid? But they have all the big ships and weapons. Sarah looked back up at the screen, where Corvani propaganda was now playing, showing the generous protection the Empire provided to its member species. Sometimes the people with all the power are the most afraid of all. 3 blocks away, in the underground meeting halls that the Corvani surveillance systems hadn't yet discovered, Marcus Webb and his resistance cell were watching the same broadcast. The former military officer had spent the last 5 years building a network of human cells across the planet, preparing for a moment that might never come. The destruction of the New Horizon had just moved that moment significantly closer. "They're getting bolder," said Jennifer Torres, a former intelligence operative who handled communications between resistance cells. This wasn't just about stopping expansion. This was a message. Marcus nodded grimly. "They know we're getting restless. Production quotas have been met, but not exceeded like they expect from broken populations. Our people still maintain their dignity, their sense of self. That scares them. So what do we do?" asked David Kim, the cell's youngest member at only 19. "We wait," Marcus replied. "We prepare. And we hope that when the moment comes, we're ready." But the moment would come sooner than any of them expected, in a way none of them could have predicted. The Corvani maintained garrison forces on Earth's surface, not because they feared human military resistance. They had systematically dismantled all human defense capabilities during the occupation, but because visible symbols of power were crucial to their psychological control system. The garrison in New Geneva consisted of 12,000 Corvani troops, heavy weapons platforms, and a command center that coordinated activities across the entire North American sector. Captain Thrak commanded the patrol unit responsible for the University District, an area considered low risk due to its civilian population of academics and students. It was routine work, checking identification documents, searching for contraband, ensuring that humans maintained proper deference when addressing Corvani personnel. Boring work, but necessary to maintain the Empire's image of omnipresent authority. On this particular morning, Thrak's unit was conducting a random security sweep of the residential blocks near the old MIT campus. These sweeps served multiple purposes. They reminded the human population that privacy was a privilege that could be revoked at any time. They occasionally uncovered illegal activities or contraband, and they provided opportunities for Corvani soldiers to demonstrate their superiority over the conquered species. Dr. Sarah Chun had just finished preparing breakfast for Emma when the heavy knocks came at their apartment door. Through the reinforced glass, she could see the distinctive silhouettes of Corvani soldiers in their environmental suits. Her heart immediately began racing, but she forced herself to remain calm. Panic would only make things worse, especially with Emma watching. "Stay here, sweetheart," she told her daughter, who was sitting at the kitchen table with her tablet, working on a school assignment about Earth's pre-conquest history, one of the few subjects the Corvani allowed to be taught without extensive modification. Sarah opened the door to find Captain Thrak and 3 other soldiers. The Corvani officer was massive, even by his species standards, nearly 8 feet tall with scales that had turned dark gray with age. His translator device rendered his words in emotionless standard English. "Random security inspection. Stand aside." Sarah stepped back, keeping her hands visible and her posture non-threatening. She had survived the war, lived through the early years of occupation, and learned the unspoken rules that kept her and Emma alive. Never make sudden movements, never argue with direct orders, never show anything that could be interpreted as defiance. The soldiers spread throughout the apartment systematically, checking behind furniture, scanning walls with handheld devices, examining personal belongings for anything that might violate the extensive list of prohibited items. Sarah knew they would find nothing. She had been scrupulously careful to remove anything that could even remotely be considered suspicious. Emma looked up from her tablet as one of the soldiers approached her table. The Corvani private was young, probably on his first occupation assignment, and he carried himself with the particular arrogance of someone trying to prove his authority. "What is this?" he demanded, pointing at Emma's tablet. "It's my homework," Emma replied politely. "About the old cities before the integration." The soldier examined the tablet, scrolling through Emma's assignment. She had been writing about the ancient ruins of Boston, describing how archaeologists had uncovered evidence of pre-colonial Native American settlements in the area. It was harmless historical research, a proved curriculum that posed no threat to Corvani authority, but the young soldier was looking for something to justify his presence, some small violation that would demonstrate his vigilance to his superiors. He noticed that Emma's assignment included a hand-drawn map showing the locations of various archaeological sites. "This constitutes unauthorized mapping of strategic locations," he declared, his translator rendering the accusation in flat, mechanical tones. Sarah felt her blood freeze. "Officer, that's just a school assignment about historical sites. There's nothing strategic about silence," the soldier snapped. "The human child has created unauthorized documentation of geographic locations. This violates Section 847 of the Occupation Protocols." Captain Thrack looked over from where he had been examining Sarah's computer. Section 847 covered the creation or possession of maps, diagrams, or other materials that could be used for navigation or tactical planning. It was an absurdly broad regulation that technically made every street map or tourist guide a potential security violation, but it was rarely enforced for such minor infractions. "Private Kess," Thrack said carefully. "The material appears to be a cade." The funeral was supposed to be small and quiet. Corvani regulations strictly limited gatherings of conquered species, no more than 50 individuals. No speeches longer than 5 minutes. No displays that could be interpreted as political demonstrations. Dr. Sarah Chun had expected perhaps 24 people to attend her daughter's service, close friends, colleagues, a few neighbors. Instead, over 3,000 humans filled Central Park on that gray Wednesday morning. They came despite the risks. Despite the Corvani patrols watching from their hovering gunships, despite the cameras recording every face for the surveillance databases. They came in silence, carrying simple white flowers that had no political significance, wearing no symbols that could be construed as resistance. But their presence spoke louder than any speech could have. Admiral Rex watched the gathering from his command center, studying the sea of human faces on the surveillance monitors. His tactical advisors were recommending immediate dispersal of the crowd, citing violation of assembly regulations. But something about the scene gave him pause. "They're not chanting," observed Lieutenant Vash, reviewing the audio feeds. "No speeches, no political slogans. They're just standing there." That was what disturbed Rex the most. He understood angry mobs. Those could be dispersed with water cannons or sonic weapons. He understood organized protests. Those could be broken up by arresting the leaders. But this silent gathering of mourners was something else entirely. It was a statement that couldn't be answered with force because it wasn't technically resistance. It was remembrance. In the underground networks that the Corvani surveillance had never quite managed to penetrate. A very different kind of gathering was taking place. Marcus Webb's resistance cell had grown from 12 members to over 200 in the 3 days since Emma's death. Similar expansions were happening across the globe as humans who had accepted occupation for 20 years suddenly found their tolerance exhausted. The communications. "Blackout starts in 6 hours, reported Jennifer Torres. "Monitoring encrypted transmissions from resistance cells worldwide. European cells confirm ready status. Asian networks are coordinating with African groups. Australian survivors have re-established contact after their silence." Marcus studied the holographic map floating above their makeshift conference table. Red dots marked confirmed resistance cells, blue indicated probable sympathizer networks, and yellow showed strategic assets that had been carefully preserved over the past 2 decades. The map revealed something that would have terrified the Corvani if they had seen it. Human resistance wasn't scattered groups of desperate rebels. It was a carefully planned, globally coordinated network that had been preparing for this moment since the day Earth fell. "What about the Corvani response?" asked David Kim. "Predictable," Marcus replied. "They've increased patrol frequencies by 30%, implemented random checkpoints, and started requiring identity verification for any gathering of more than 10 people. Standard occupation protocol for dealing with unrest." "They still don't understand, do they?" Jennifer said quietly. "They think this is just another rebellion they can crush with the usual methods." Marcus shook his head. "They've been ruling through fear for so long, they've forgotten that humans respond differently to fear than most species. We don't break under pressure, we adapt. And we remember, the Resistance had spent 20 years preparing for this moment, but they hadn't been preparing for a traditional insurgency. They had learned from the failed uprisings of other species, studied the patterns of Corvani suppression tactics, and developed an entirely different approach to liberation. Humans had always been builders. Even under occupation, even with restrictions on technology and manufacturing, they had continued to build. The Corvani saw factories producing textiles and basic manufactured goods. They didn't see the hidden compartments where advanced components were secretly fabricated. They saw universities teaching approved curricula. They didn't see the underground laboratories, where human scientists had spent decades. Reverse engineering captured Corvani technology. Dr. Amanda Foster had been the head of theoretical physics at Stanford before the occupation. For the past 15 years, she had officially worked as a quality control inspector at a textile factory. Unofficially, she had been leading a team of 60 scientists in developing technologies that the Corvani didn't know humans possessed. "The quantum tunneling drives are ready," she reported. To Marcus via encrypted transmission. "All 17 ships are fully operational." Ships. The Corvani believed they had destroyed all human spacefaring capability during the occupation. What they hadn't realized was that humans had been salvaging Corvani wreckage for 2 decades. Carefully collecting every piece of advanced technology that survived their own orbital bombardments. In underground facilities hidden beneath abandoned mines and empty warehouses, human engineers had been building something the Corvani would never expect. A fleet. Not a fleet designed to fight Corvani warships in traditional space combat. That would have been suicide. Instead, humans had built something completely different. Ships designed for stealth, for infiltration, for carrying out missions that would cripple the Corvani Empire from within. "The navigation coordinates are confirmed," added Captain Lisa Park, formerly of the destroyed human space navy, now commander of the secret fleet. "We've identified the locations of every major Corvani facility within 50 light years. Command stations, supply depots, communication relays, and most importantly, their automated manufacturing plants." The Corvani Empire was vast but surprisingly fragile. It depended heavily on automated systems to maintain control across dozens of star systems. The reptilian species was naturally hierarchical and specialized, which made them excellent at creating efficient bureaucratic structures but terrible at adapting to unexpected situations. Their entire empire ran on predictable schedules, standardized procedures, and centralized control systems, all of which made it vulnerable to the kind of coordinated simultaneous attack that humans were planning. "What about the Corvani fleet positions?" Marcus asked. 3/4 of their major warships are stationed at the Outer Rim, dealing with some kind of crisis involving the Valdris rebels, Jennifer reported. "The Valdris have been causing trouble in Sector 12 for the past 6 months. The Corvani have been throwing everything they have at suppressing that uprising." Marcus smiled grimly. The Valdris rebellion wasn't random. It had been carefully coordinated with human resistance networks for over a year, designed to draw Corvani forces away from the core worlds at exactly the right moment. The blue-skinned humanoids didn't know they were part of a larger plan, but their sacrifice would not be forgotten. Local defense forces? Minimal. The Corvani have grown complacent. 20 years of successful occupation have convinced them that conquered species don't have the capability for organized resistance. They're about to discover how wrong they are. But even as the resistance prepared for their coordinated strike, the Corvani were beginning to notice disturbing patterns. Small incidents were occurring across human territories, equipment malfunctions in critical facilities, communication disruptions, minor accidents that delayed supply shipments. None of it was dramatic enough to suggest organized resistance, but the cumulative effect was beginning to strain their administrative capabilities. Captain Thrak had been relieved of field duty following the incident with the Shun child. Officially, it was routine rotation of personnel. Unofficially, Admiral Rex was concerned about the captain's increasingly paranoid reports about human behavior patterns. But Thrak's concerns were proving more accurate than anyone wanted to admit. "They're watching us differently," Thrak insisted during his debriefing with Admiral Rex. Before the incident, humans would avoid eye contact, show proper deference, maintain submissive postures. Now they look directly at us. They comply with orders, but there's no fear in their expressions anymore. "You're imagining things," Admiral Rex replied. "Psychological stress from the field incident has distorted your perceptions." But Thrak wasn't imagining anything. Across Earth and throughout human settlements in other star systems, something fundamental had changed. The death of one child had crystallized 20 years of accumulated rage and determination into something focused and deadly. The Corvani had ruled through calculated terror, but they had never understood the difference between fear and respect. Humans had been afraid of them, yes, but they had never respected them. And now the fear was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous: cold, methodical hatred backed by careful planning and advanced technology. Dr. Sarah Chun had not attended any resistance meetings. She had not contacted any underground networks. She had not participated in any planning sessions. But 3 days after her daughter's funeral, she walked into the Corvani garrison headquarters in New Geneva and requested a meeting with the commanding officer. The request was so unusual that it reached Admiral Rex's attention within hours. A human civilian, the mother of the child killed in the recent incident, wanted to discuss accommodation arrangements for future interactions between human and Corvani personnel. It sounded like exactly the kind of capitulation the Corvani expected from broken spirits. "IG,"